Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for joining me. I'm going to start with a question for once today, and that question is, what do these, this, and even this have in common? Well, they're all things that I've used or do use to help see what on earth I'm doing when I'm working on vintage electronics. Now, there was a time when I could see ants playing darts and tell you whether or not they'd hit the bullseye 50 yards away. But quite honestly, these days I need my glasses on just to see if I've put my trousers on or not. So I literally over the years have had two pairs of glasses, one over the other. I've had table lamps and spotlights and stuff trying to light up and bring better lighting in to see what on earth I'm doing. And I work on generally not so much surface mounted components, mostly potentiometers, electrolytics and transistors and what have you. But circuit boards are getting harder and harder to see, and even when you're working on old technology like this 1981 Sanyo here, there can be sort of 10 or 15 joints to desolder before you can access the mechanism underneath when you're repairing belts and stuff like that. So I'd often thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a microscope so that I could perhaps see better what I'm doing, not just during the repair process itself, but quite often if you're working on vintage electronic games, things like Galaxy Invader and things like that, for example. There's so many traces going to the VFD displays. If one or two of those are a bit cracked or corroded, it can be almost impossible with the naked eye to see where the problem lies. So I thought, yeah, it'd be great to have something that I could actually see close up what's going on. And I'd thought about getting a microscope. Truth be told, I wasn't really in a position to be able to afford to get one, and purely by chance I was approached by the lovely people at Joyalens, and they said, would you be interested in featuring our digital microscope on the channel? And I said, well, actually, yeah, that would be great, thank you very much, I'll give it a go. Now, full disclosure at this point in time, this has been provided for me to review on the channel, take a look at, and I'm able to keep it if I want to. So just wanted to let you know that I'm not being paid to promote this. This isn't a paid promotion per se, but, and also, by the way, I'm not haven't been instructed what to say or not to say. I'm going to give a completely honest and open review of my experience here. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to get to keep this either way. I'm hoping that's not going to bias me too much. I don't need to get as much out of a microscope as many people might, so I'm going to just basically give a fairly open and honest review as to how I see it and the build quality and the usability for me, so that people who are undertaking similar tasks to me will know whether or not it might be suitable for them. So anyway, this is the Joyalens JL246MS, I believe, and it all comes very neatly packaged in this little box here. So I'm going to get it open, see what's inside, and yeah, let's get it set up, see what it does. So here we have it then. First thing we're greeted with is the user manual and the components list just here. So we'll check that off in a moment. And here she is. Okay, right, all looks neat and tidy. Several bagged items here. Looks like a USB cable there, and looks like a sort of a power connector, control unit probably for the lights, I would imagine. The main unit itself just here. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath as well. Very nice. So I'm going to work my way through this. It looks like we've got lights here, we've got a remote control, it looks like we've got lenses and all sorts of stuff in here. So I'm going to get it set up, show you what it looks like, and we'll go from there. I've got to say, just a quick note here, I've had this for a little while and I'd suffered quite a nasty shoulder injury and wasn't able to record this for a while, so I've been patiently waiting to crack this open. So I'm excited to get it up and running. Right, let's go. Well, first thing I've got to say is the amount of packaging in this is superb. Form-fitted foam, all-purpose cut. Everything's lovely and safe in there and nicely protected. and regular viewers to the channel know how much I appreciate a decent bit of packaging, so top marks for that. I've got to say, everything feels really safe. There wasn't any damage as far as I could see. Haven't had a close look at the parts yet, but certainly anything that's put in this box would have arrived in the condition that it was sent in, I'm quite sure. And the other thing that I'd like to say is just the amount of stuff that's in here. Now, I don't know what any of this is yet, so we'll figure this out as we go. And I did say I was just going to build this and come back later, but I wanted to take this opportunity just to say how much stuff's actually in this bit of kit. Not in a sort of intimidating way, but you know, you've got the stands, we've got the cables, we've got lights, we've got power supply, remote control, we've got various tests, inspections, specimens I suppose you could call them, a little light box for microscopy and what have you. So all good stuff. Anyway, enough of me rambling, let's get this thing set up and see what it does. Okay, well, it's pretty much together now. The assembly instructions are very straightforward to a degree. One thing to note is that in order to thread the actual monitor and microscope unit through onto the stand, you do have to remove these little screws. It's not the end of the world, but they're little thumb screws, 2 of them, and you've got to kind of remove and reinstate those, I guess obviously whenever you change the lens and if you're removing the head unit for any reason. So that's just something to be mindful of. Right, with regard then to the gantry, that appears to be fairly firm and smooth on the up and down there for the fine adjustments. Now the well, I don't know if it's anodizing or whatever coating they've put on the steel here is quite, I say rough, it feels fairly heavy duty, but it does, oh there we go, look, it does mean it's not terribly smooth, and you could see then, you can feel that, and that's even without the adjuster screw. The adjuster screw's out now totally, and it's just not, doesn't give you any real feel as to whether or not it's, that locks in okay, nicely in fact, but when you remove it nothing happens, and it is a little bit kind of, you know, graunchy. Now as for the x-axis, you can see that it's not, and that's with it loosened right out, it just doesn't feel, there's not a lot of finesse, put it that way. That being said, for the most part I guess this will be in one position and it won't be adjusted very often, and you will be able to gently coerce it to where you need it to go, I'm sure, but it's just not the smoothest thing in the world. But then again, I don't think these are the most expensive microscopes either, so I guess it's kind of all fair in love and war, as they say. Also, it comes with microscope slide springs and little grips just down here, which you can insert if you want. I shan't need them because I'm going to want a flat plane to work on. In terms of the bed, it's not terribly large. In fact, what is it? We got, what's that? About 180mm, 7 inches by, well, 200mm, 8 inches, something like that. I'm just going to reach across here and put an old Walkman on there, on the bed. I'm just going to tilt this down. So that gives you an idea of size and scale, as it were. Is the whole bed is pretty much taken up by a chunky old Walkman. So it's going to be great for that sort of thing, I think. Probably not so much for boomboxes and things like that, but we'll see how we get on with it in due course. Right, it doesn't say anything at all about how to wire this thing in. I noticed there's a small hole for power at the back of the lights, and it does say though to put that into the back of the light box if you're using the light box lens, so we know that bit. Then we've got, I think, HDMI lead there. Oh, it does come with comes with a little memory card as well, so you can record, I think, directly onto the card from the monitor here. There's a USB there. We've got the controller, which I assume is for the lights, and as I say, you've got 3 ends on that cable. There's a USB to USB-C cable there, and then there's an HDMI cable here. I've found the wiring instructions in the user manual, and basically you've got the USB power comes in via the supplied adapter, and that then goes on to power the lights, the LED lights, from a small socket there, and then the USB powers the main unit. Lights on and off and brightness are controlled via this. So the information is there, it's just that it wasn't included in the assembly steps, and I would have thought that, bearing in mind this is an electrical item with several sockets, plugs and wires, that it would have told you in the assembly section where that or how those cables go. Just a thought. So she's plugged in then. We've got the power to the lights at the base, then we've also got the other power lead coming across directly to the microscope unit proper. It just feels, it's okay. I think it just kind of is a bit scruffy because it's like the wires don't really know where they want to go. You've got wires hanging out the back of here for the power, but then this kind of controller is quite tight. This could just do with being a little bit longer, so that we could thread it like you would do with a microphone stand or something, and actually keep it neat and tidy out the way. It almost feels like the control unit is sort of almost floating off the weight of the cable coming off the main unit. It might just be being critical, but I like to have everything out of the way when I'm working, and you just might find yourself tripping over cables and stuff like that when you're trying to access the controls, that's all. So it looks like this microscope could be quite useful for general scientific use and school projects through to fairly basic consumer electronics. And it comes with 3 different lenses for different purposes. And lens D we won't look too much at today, to be honest, because that's more for, as I say, the science side and microscope slides and things like that. The distance to object is only about 4 to 5 millimeters. So you wouldn't be able to sort of get under it, move surface mounted components around, get any soldering irons and stuff like that. It's more really for general scientific use, as I say. So it gives you 1800 to just over 2000 times magnification according to the book, if you include the 3 times digital zoom and output to 28-inch monitor. But what it does do is come with a nice little light box as well, so you can plug that directly into the power supply instead of the flexible LEDs. And it gives you a nice backlit box, so you can look at things like, it comes with pine tree examples and a bit of onion skin, that kind of thing to look at. And of course you've got specimen jars and things like that, so you can make your own little projects and have a look at your own stuff at home. But with regards to the other lenses that will probably be more useful for, certainly from my point of view, we've got lens A, as it's called, which is a 12 to 320mm object distance. And that gives you around 18 to 720 times magnification, again with the caveat of digital zoom and 28-inch monitor. So that's going to really let you get in to see full screen representation of resistors and stuff like that. Really might actually be a little bit too much. I think the one that's going to be more useful from my point of view is what they call lens L, and that is a 90 to 300mm distance to object with only a 60 to 240 times magnification. And I think for electronics that's going to be perfect, because it will allow us to see the general topography of the circuit board. We'll be able to clearly read and differentiate circuit board component numbers and names. We'll be able to see traces and things like that, because at the end of the day a microscope is to obviously see extremely close up, but we don't need extremely close up from our point of view, certainly from my point of view. I just want some helping hands, or helping eyes I should say, to be able to see the things that I can't really see without, getting right up to my face and having a loop on top of my glasses and then trying to solder at the same time. That would be nigh on impossible. So I think this one's going to be the best all round. So yeah, so it's horses for courses really, and so far so good. And I'll just give you a quick example of the lens A. This here is a resistor on an old circuit board, and if I can get the ruler anywhere near it and find out where it is, oh well, this one will do, there we go. Each increment is 0.5 millimeter, so 2, 4, 6. So that resistor is literally around about 3 millimeters long, and in real terms, in fact, here we go, I can even zoom in digitally here now. and if I zoom in all the way up to 3 times digital zoom, I can't even fill the frame with that. Well, maybe just about. So yeah, as I say, that 3mm resistor, look at that. That's incredible. So that might be really good for tiny surface mounted components, but in all honesty, that's really just for magically close inspection, and I wouldn't expect us to want to be able to, or need indeed to be able to see with that kind of resolution, or that kind of magnification I should say. And in terms of the digital zoom, it's just there, nice and easy enough looking. You can focus through the top of the capacitor down to the pads just down there. You can then, if you wanted to, of course, lift the whole thing up and away a little bit, and I'll just refocus. And that's not all the way out by any stretch, but it gives you a good idea of the higher level topography now, and the traces and following traces around. So yeah, that's a really nice lens actually, and probably quite a good one for inspection. But as I say, I'll just go on to the other lens now and see what that gives us. I've just changed to lens L now, which is the 90 to 300mm object distance and 60 to 240 times magnification when viewed on the larger screen. And this one here is now 8 inches, maybe 200mm away from the board. This gives me loads of room to work under here. In fact, if I put my soldering iron along here, you can see these resistors here. You know, you could reflow pads, you can inspect, you can check traces, all sorts of stuff from up here. And there's loads of room as well under that one, so that's good. And it also does go all the way down as well too. Let me just try and work our way down a bit. You can use the stop as well, incidentally. There is a little stop, a depth stop built in as well, that you can use to lock yourself in. So I'm just going to zoom back out. I'm not saying this is the maximum extent of where it goes to, but we'll figure it out as we go. There we go. Something like that. So again, we've got these resistors pretty much filling the screen, and you know, you can see just these. There's a capacitor, look across there, and the resistor just there. Yeah, beautiful. And you can kind of focus all the way through from the pads right through to the top of the resistor itself. Yeah, look at that, fantastic. And that's all off of one lens as well, so too much detail really for what we need. So we can lift that back out of the way. Bit graunchy, that noise, I must admit, but there we go. So that's the extent of that one. Plenty of room to work underneath, and you can still see what's going on with the board. So I think somewhere between that lens L and lens A, as we called it, I think would be just the job. Nice. Rightio, I've just brought this into a different room and attached the microscope to a larger monitor via the supplied HDMI cable. I've turned the lights out. It might look all very weird here, but I just wanted to show you kind of the screen that I can see here, plus also the output as well. Now, when you plug in the HDMI, you're not supposed to be able to see it on the screen on the actual built-in monitor anymore when it outputs to a larger screen. It did think about it a few times. It was kind of flickering back and forward, if I'm honest. It wasn't. I did think it wasn't even going to work to start with. It was saying like no input signal found and what have you. It finally came on anyway, and I've got both here now. But the instruction book does say, I've just got it with me here, you can take photos through the photo capture button, but you cannot record when you're actually viewing on the HDMI. That's just something to bear in mind. Right, I guess this would be quite useful for showing groups of people what you're doing whilst you're doing it for demonstration, for classroom purposes. It would also be quite useful, I guess, for just, well, anyone in a workshop really that's looking to see what they're doing in more detail than this. I mean, I think this looks fabulous, if I'm honest. I mean, I am already quite taken with this because I can already imagine, I'm looking down as I'm talking to you, I'm looking at the board on the actual deck here, and I would definitely be having to use like my loop probably to get in there, pointing, you know, holding a light in one hand, the loop in the other, and what have you. Whereas with this, I can just look up at the screen, and it's quite marvellous, I've got to be honest with you. I'm thinking about, so much so I've only had this, you know, literally an hour or two, and I'm already thinking about changing some of my workshop areas around so that I can have a table dedicated to a microscope with perhaps even a smaller monitor than this on the wall. I think it's brilliant because I can see what's going on here. This is obviously the top level, so I can see the chips if I wanted to inspect that. You know, we can see plenty good enough as to whether or not there's any damage on those legs there. If we wanted to, I could just come in a bit more and refocus like so. Quite handy as well for worn out old chips where the numbers are indistinct, or if perhaps they've overheated a bit and you can't quite read the numbers on there. By using a magnification like this on the microscope, you'd be able to see much better any traces of old print and stuff like that. Especially if we went ahead and used the whole kind of reverse and black and white and stuff like that. Haven't got the remote control in this room, but yeah, pretty cool. Now, if we turned it over though now to the solder side, as we might say, you can see all the resistors and stuff like that already on there. Again, just refocus slightly because we have changed the distance from the lens. But look at that, that's excellent. And again, I haven't got my remote control in this room with me, but the push of a button I would be able to rotate that so we could read all of these diode and resistor numbers without having to kind of read them upside down, as it were. So yeah, the output to the HDMI, you can't record from it whilst you're doing that, but that's kind of okay, I think, so wouldn't be a problem for me. Okay, well, looking at these electronic cityscapes in HD is rather marvellous. I've got to say, it's quite there's quite a novelty to it, but they really do look like to be useful things to do. So I'm going to try and put it to the test a little bit here now and see what would happen in real life. I've got a Sanyo player here. It's an M440. I make notes on it when they come in for repair. This one says, yeah, it needs belts, it'll get the full service, but it also says headphone resolder required. So whilst this isn't going to break any records for diagnosis, it would appear that this one's probably got a headphone jack issue where it's plugged in over the years and walked around, carried in people's pockets and what have you, and you find that the headphone becomes intermittent because there's a fracture or a dry joint or something on the headphone socket. So to that end, I've got this lens A in, so it's given me loads of room underneath. There's like 6 or 8 inches of leeway, and I'm pretty confident I know what the issue is going to be. So I'm going to head straight for the area there for the headphone socket, and if I can find a little dibber, here we go. We can see we've got the right and left channel, and then we've got the grounding point here, which is where this capacitor is earthed to. So I'm suspecting we've got an issue on one of these joints just here, and indeed it looks like one of them is rather flaky. So this would normally be something you would do with a loop or, you know, magnifying glass or something like that. So I'm just going to bring this in and refocus it, and yeah, sure enough, that looks pretty ropey just there. So I'm gonna plug some headphones in actually and see indeed what the issue is, see if that makes it worse. Yeah, and I can really see that wiggling around now. So I'm not saying this one is necessarily the closest that we can get with regard to the view, but that's certainly close enough, because of course, as long as we can see what we need to do, that's the main thing. So there we go, there's the obviously dry joint. And one of the things you can do with this, now I've got the remote control in my hands, so we can do stuff like let me see, we can do like a negative colouring on it, we can do monochromatic if we want to, we can zoom in. Let's have a look. Yeah, because we can zoom in digitally while still retaining some gap underneath. I'm sort of talking in tongues a bit, but I'm sort of figuring this out as I go really. So there we go. Look how crystal clear that issue is, and we can see that plain as day now, absolutely plain as day. And yet, if we wanted to, we've still got plenty of room, plenty of working room under here to actually work on it in situ without fear of getting in the way of the microscope or getting too much solder mess or anything over the lens. So that's really cool, actually. Really pleased with that. So that's one way you could diagnose an issue like that. It doesn't have to be in black and white, of course. It just kind of showed the shadow up quite nicely. There's the colour version. So very nice, good stuff. Okay, but if we've got slightly larger boards though, we can still get those in there fairly easily. Got quite a nice depth of field as well. There's a potentiometer. Then we've got capacitors, resistors. I'll just tweak the focus a touch. But there you go, look at that. You can see all the way down the length of the capacitors. You can see resistor values, all that kind of stuff. Multi-plugs just there. What else have we got? Heat sinks, switches, diodes, all kinds of stuff on there. Nice. So it's really easy to see. Very nice. And we can of course zoom in again digitally or by using the slider, and that's more than enough. You know, we're not here to do microscopic analysis necessarily. This is more just to be able to facilitate what we're actually doing. Now I can see, for example, there's a transistor and a little series of diodes, and I'm just going to bring them across. There we go. I'm going to follow my, there we go. Now I can barely see those with my own eyes here, but straight away I can read that's A114, and there's your markings for your relevant legs just there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this just here, but what you can do is also invert them as well, so that you can't do it while you're recording, but once it's stopped you can actually sort of upside down your picture to make things easier to read if you wanted to. And I'll just give you a quick example of that now. And as simple as that, we've inverted it. Again, can also make it higher contrast, negative images if we wanted to. We can make it black and white, all sorts of things depending on what we want to focus on. So yeah, look at that. We can now easily read, and again, if I wanted to zoom in onto that transistor, just now it was quite a long way away and upside down, and without even changing the zoom at all, you can read. Oh, that's the contrast. You don't want that. Brightness. There we go. Look at that. A114, and you can see the markings on there, and that's without touching the microscope itself. That's just literally just a couple of little buttons on the remote control. So I'm still figuring this out as I go, but to be honest, so far super pleased with it. Okay folks, there's the digital microscope from Joyalens. Hope you found that interesting. This is really some bit of kit, to be fair. So I've given it a very quick overview today. As with any of these things, they're so comprehensive that some of the things you have to kind of find out for yourself, but hopefully I've given you a bit of an insight into what it is, how it works and how we can use it. So a few final thoughts really. Firstly, the whole thing was very well packaged. It's been looked after in transit, and I noticed that mine had actually had a knock in transit. The outer box was a bit damaged, but nonetheless the contents were in perfectly safe, superb condition. It's well appointed as a kit. There are numerous lenses in here for different focal lengths and different requirements, different operations, so that's pretty good. Also comes with the necessary wiring to power the unit and to output it for the USB, and indeed the HDMI out for the larger monitor if you wanted to. Also even comes with the backlight holder for microscope slides and some specimens for pure scientific curiosity, or to perhaps make your own if you want to go out in the garden and explore and look at a few things under the microscope. All good stuff. Also you've got the slide holder and all that kind of thing as well, so that's great. But from the electronics point of view, there are lenses here that are very useful to us. Ones that give us access to looking at traces and components and pads and that kind of thing, whilst still giving off enough clearance to work underneath, so that we can use the soldering iron or any other tools under there without fear of fouling ourselves. So that's pretty good stuff. Now, I've got to say the quality is great. Really pleased with what I can see both on the little screen here and indeed the HD output. Excellent quality. You're certainly not going to struggle to see what you're doing. Coupled with things like the inversions of colour, rotating the screen and the black and white feature and things like that, just allows you to be able to see crystal clear images of what you're looking at through the scope. A couple of downsides though, I suppose, is there's no audio output. That means that it makes it very difficult when you're trying to record, for example, like this video now. You might find that some of the video from the Microscope might be a little bit out of sync because there is no audio cue that we can line up on this. So we've got to kind of make sure that we pick relevant parts of footage to superimpose over the main video, as it were. Now, that's not a main issue for most people. It's only because sometimes people like me would be able to implement that footage and include it in our videos. So if you're just using it from a day-to-day point of view, you've got no reason to record the audio. At the end of the day, you know, we're just trying to look at what we can see. It just helps us to see better at the end of the day, doesn't it? So that's what it's really for. Great for showing people in classroom environments as well, if you can export the image onto the HD monitor. So that's pretty cool. But you can't record whilst you are showing it on the large screen. So that could be a little bit of a shame. It would be quite nice if you could do that. You can either show people or you can record it for later. You can't do both simultaneously. Now, as I say, not really a major problem because you're generally recording it for yourself anyway at the time, or you'd be showing someone else what's going on. So overall, would I buy one? Well, as I said at the top of the video, this one's actually been given to me to keep, and then there's no sort of bribery in that respect. It's full disclosure, and I'm allowed to say whatever I think about it. And I've got to say, I'm absolutely chuffed with it. I think it's fantastic. I wish I'd bought one sooner. It's really useful. I mean, the amount of times I'm squinting and poking through my glasses and the loop and trying to figure stuff out, I can just chuck it under the scope. That's amazing, to be fair. We'll be able to follow traces around more easily, see if the repairs have been affected properly. It's just wonderful. In fact, I'm so pleased with it. I'm looking at actually changing part of my workshop around to give myself a dedicated microscope table bench area where I can not only see this as it is, but also set up a small monitor on the wall behind it as well, just for my own purposes. So yeah, I'm pleased enough with this overall. It's light, it's portable, the build quality it's okay. You know, it is a metal construction. It's a little bit on the as I said at the beginning, lacks a little bit of finesse, but that's just what it is. It still works perfectly well, and yeah, I'm just super pleased with it, to be honest. Plenty of scope on the arms here. The flexible lights are really good. You know, they're bright enough. They are far enough away if you need to give you the clearance on the larger circuit boards. Obviously you can't get a whole boombox under here because, you know, you're limited by the size of the bed and the placement of the scope, although I suppose you could, if you wanted to, put that on a remote arm and swing it out. That's always an option, to be fair. Could always, that's something to think about, isn't it? You could take the whole scope off and then have it on a boom. You could probably then swing that out over anything you wanted to. That's something to think about, maybe a wall mounted boom for it. But anyway, yeah, I'm kind of waffling on a bit here really, but I'm just looking at it, thinking about how I can use it. As I say, I've only, you know, had this open for an hour or two and I'm already excited about it and definitely will be using it. So I'm looking forward to including it in some of my videos out to you guys as well. That'd be great, just to show some real close-up stuff when I'm replacing various components and things. So yeah, there she is, the Joyalens digital microscope. Thank you ever so much for watching. Hope you found it interesting. Please check out some of my other videos where I do actually repair boomboxes, 8-tracks, Walkmans, vintage games, all kinds of stuff. So I'll see you soon, but in the meantime, you guys stay safe, and thanks again for watching. Bye bye for now.